Now, Nintendo was down in their luck for many years in a row, missing their sales targets and being forgotten by gamers. However, at some point, they struck gold with the release of the Nintendo Switch and great titles like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. But the game we are talking about today is the classic platformer game with the Italian hero as the star. Because while the first game was a huge success, we haven't heard much about a sequel, but as we have seen in the past, they can pop up out of nowhere. So today we will discuss what we could see in a potential sequel, because what mechanics will return, where will we go to, and how similar is it to the first? Well, let's find out. And guess what? Commonwealth Rome is here to help me out, so let's get to work. Now, Super Mario Odyssey was released all the way back on the 27th of October 2017 and was an instant hit for multiple reasons. The game went back to its roots, having a lot of sandbox-like elements like older titles such as Super Mario 64 and Sunshine. And the whole adventure revolves around Mario exploring Earth-based settings with his new partner Cappy. Now, one of the most unique selling points of this game is the ability to throw Cappy onto certain enemies and objects, allowing you to take control of them. These things made it a huge success, and from the first trailer onward, people were excited to play this game. So thanks to it looking and being so good, Nintendo ended up making a fortune off it, selling over 16 million copies of them. So with it being such a huge success, the chances of another title coming are quite high. We saw the same with Super Mario Galaxy after all. So let's look into what could possibly happen here. First of all, what kind of situation is the most likely?
We have seen Nintendo create completely new games inspired by older ones. A good example of this is Twilight Princess, which takes a lot from Ocarina of Time. This game was first going to be a lot like Wind Waker, and was called the Wind Waker 2 in the beginning. But as time went on, things changed and developers were told that they should start by doing what could not be done in Ocarina of Time, particularly horseback combat. And before you knew it, in just 4 months' time, the team created the horseback mechanic with a realistic presentation, with the whole game in general looking more like a mature and updated take on the classic Zelda Ocarina of Time. So is this going to happen to a new type of Super Mario Odyssey game as well? Maybe. Let's look at the other options as well. Because it could be that Nintendo goes for something simpler, something that doesn't require as much effort, and makes them more money as well. For this, we'll take a look at 2 games that were also huge hits and required almost no effort for Nintendo or were made in no time. First up, Super Mario Galaxy. This game was released for the Wii and was a huge success with some mind-blowing new mechanics based around gravity and space. And following the great success of the original, the development of the next game started as soon as the first one was released. That's how confident Nintendo was. Many of the ideas were based on those shown in the first game, and a lot of content could simply not fit in. One reason was that Nintendo worked really hard on many of the ideas shown in the first game, but they also had a ton of new ideas that they were not able to put into the game, and even more ideas on top to that. According to Shigeru Miyamoto, 90% of the features in the game would be new in Super Mario Galaxy 2, whereas the remaining 10% were already introduced or featured in the original, which was kind of true, but a lot of the concept was still based on stuff seen from the first. And of course, the graphics and engine weren't anything new, they were completely reused. As you can imagine, stuff like this did save a lot of development time, and it could be that they are going to repeat this plan with Super Mario Odyssey. It could even be that they are already hard at work developing it right now, just like they did back in the day.
However, like we mentioned before, sometimes they started out their plan and halfway through changed their whole idea. So while we expect something more closely related to the first Super Mario Odyssey, just like they did with Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, they can always surprise us in the end. Although I'm not sure what they could possibly add instead of stuff like the capture mechanic, especially because it's so popular, which wasn't the case with the Wind Waker. Sure, later on people started to like it more, but around launch fans weren't too happy with it. So let's assume we get a similar situation to Super Mario Galaxy 2. When it comes to this possibility, there's one huge question that needs to be answered. Which game mechanics and gameplay ideas will return in this new adventure? Which parts of the game are the most likely to remain, and which will be thrown away? Well, let's start with the most important element of the entire game, the enemy and object capture mechanic. It's a unique ability that's only seen in this game, which Mario is able to do because of his newfound hat friend, Cappy. When you throw him at certain enemies, creatures, or objects such as Goombas, you can control them and use them in your adventure to get past certain obstacles. However, will it come back? Well, we hope it does, but there's one problem with it all. And we can see this at the end and start of the game. The character Cappy, who allows you to capture stuff, is only with you on your adventure to save his sister, who's kidnapped by Bowser. But at the end, when you defeated Bowser, you saved her together with Peach. And while Cappy is still with you after this, it's not a guarantee that he's going to stay with Mario for much longer. His job of saving his sister is done. So maybe as soon as she and Peach are done with their cute little vacation, everyone will go home. Now, while this is certainly a possibility and a bit of a problem for Nintendo when it comes to the story, the chances of this being solved are huge. The capture mechanic still has a lot of potential, since they could always add more enemies and scenarios to use it in new and cool ways. When you think about it, there are still a lot of enemies seen in other games they can use, and more new ones can be created for the sequel. Just like in Super Mario Galaxy 2, they will take existing concepts and take them to the next level and unleash all their new ideas on it. And they will most likely have a lot of them because they never made any serious DLC for the game. So we think this will return.
But what about the whole world travel theme with the Odyssey? We have already seen almost everything on the planet after all. Well, when it comes to this, we aren't as certain if this will make a comeback, because at the end of Odyssey, we even went into space, which kind of shows that they were running out of ideas on the planet itself. So if it comes back, the whole thing will be different, at least in some ways, or it might not return at all. When it comes to this one, it's not as easy to see new potential in it, so because of that we'll say it's not that likely. But what about the whole collection idea then? With the player trying to find all the moons in the world, now the chances of this coming back are really high, just because of one reason. Before the release of the game, Nintendo showed off an official infograph, which showed off the difference between the progression-oriented and the more sandbox exploration style of the 3D Mario games. Or as put by Miyamoto, casual and core games, and Super Mario Odyssey is considered to be the latter. And since it's part of the tree of the family, collecting stuff like stars, shines and moons, so of course it's bound to return. But now that we have an idea of what kind of things will most likely be seen in the next game, we need to answer one more very important question. Where will we go in our next adventure? Well, when it comes to this, we have two really good options which Nintendo even hints at to an extent. One of them was even seen on the map that was used during the promotion of Super Mario Odyssey in Japan. It was just sitting there, taunting every player who noticed it. Isle Delfino from Super Mario Sunshine. However, it doesn't actually appear in the final game. The player has no option of going there whatsoever, and we haven't gotten any DLC related to it so far, which means that there is at least a possibility of the sequel taking place on this island, after it has been gone for over 10 years. Now sure, this Japanese promotion is the only evidence of this even being possible at all, but it still points toward a plan Nintendo had at some point at the very least.
And if we go back to the well-known island where Flood became our best pal, we might also see some old characters. For example, the Pianta, which we haven't seen in the main series Super Mario game in ages. So it could be cool to see them again. The modding community has even been busy making this stuff a reality by recreating certain parts of the island in the game Super Mario Odyssey, like the classic Delfino Plaza. And some of these even looked so good that people actually thought it was real leaked footage from Nintendo themselves. So if the fans can even recreate something so good looking it convinces almost everyone, then Nintendo can certainly make it. And the other option is also a good possibility, but they are in no way even related to each other, with the idea being inspired by the final worlds of the game. Because as you can see in Super Mario Odyssey, we eventually go to the moon as well, actually using the Odyssey to go into space. And this opens the door for an adventure far beyond Earth and everything floating around it, in a similar way to Super Mario Galaxy. To be honest, this is yet again a good option, and Nintendo could always go for it, also making Super Mario Galaxy fans happy that there's sort of a third game. And it would also be cool to see what would happen if we go into space this time with stuff like cappy powers playing a role. Can you just imagine going from planet to planet, being able to explore bigger ones more freely while capturing all kinds of weird space monsters? It would certainly be an interesting experience and quite different from the older Galaxy games seen on the Wii. Although it could also be that it's in a space setting with no elements from the older Super Mario Galaxy games whatsoever. And now that I think about it, we could also see some old characters return here. Just think of the bees and penguins, which would be something new and interesting. However, while these options for new worlds or kingdoms in the next game are good guesses, nothing is set in stone. It all just depends on what Nintendo feels like doing and what their Super Mario team really wants to create in the end. Because maybe they don't want to take any inspiration from older titles besides Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey is in the same category as Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine, but in the end, it's quite different from it. Although we can't be certain if we will see anything like this in a sequel, or even if we get a new Super Mario Odyssey game. However, this is not the right video to discuss things like that, because we actually did that over on Commonwealth Realms channel already. So be sure to check out that video by clicking on the card on screen or in the upper right corner. And don't forget to subscribe to both our channels, so you won't miss a thing.